there was just light emanating from the plants. Life and light was emanating from the rocks, the leaves, the trunk of the leaves, the trees, the branches, everything, even the sand, everything was pulsating with its own identity. Hi, my name is Debbie Ali, and among many things, I am a teacher. I am a professionally trained teacher and a professionally trained writer. I have been for my entire life. Um, I'm a very strong advocate for women and men, but I lean a little bit more on the side of women in terms of counseling, trauma type counseling, PTSD, anxiety, depression, you name it, all of the outcomes of abuse and trauma. And that came about as a direct result of an interaction with the criminal elements of the country in which I was born, which is a very, very tiny island in the Caribbean. I was born and raised there. However, I should make mention that as a child growing up, I've had so many, you know, odd experiences, which I never fully understood, of course, depending on the age, until I was much, much older and much more informed about the existence of an entire spiritual realm that I never knew existed before. And as a child, I would have terrible nightmares and odd shifting type experiences in the real world, in the 3D world in which we live. And there was no reasonable explanation for it. But what I did know was that I grew up. I won't say I grew up. Let me rephrase that. I joined the Christian church, the Presbyterian church, at a young age, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And you learned the typical things, the sing-songy Sunday school, basic Bible stories, and so forth, but on a very basic level. So there was no in-depth knowledge about the afterlife, or yes, we knew the basic Christian teachings about Christ being crucified and resurrected. We knew angels existed. We learned about the very basic things. However, the battles I faced as a child were actually with demonic entities. Of course, I wasn't aware at the time that I was actually wielding Archangel Michael's sword. And not his sword per se, but maybe a smaller version of it. I was using holy water and prayer. And at 7 or 8 years old, I really was so confused. Where does this sword come from? What is this water thingy that I'm throwing? What prayer is this I'm saying? And why? And why is this thing after me? And why do I have to fight it? I'm so young. And there were so many questions that nobody was able to answer. I went to my parents thinking, perhaps they would have some responses for me. Of course, they were equally confused. And after each of these experiences, I would awaken exhausted. And when I use the word exhausted, I don't say it lightly. I mean drained to the core, unable to attend school so very often. And I've been taken to doctors, and physically, mentally, they could find nothing, no evidence of any deviations or illnesses or anything of the sort. And so I stopped speaking about it and I battled on my own. Many, many years later, grown adult, married, 2 young kids at the time. This was in 2006. I was abducted from inside of my home by nefarious criminals and taken at gunpoint, held hostage for 14 days and 14 nights. During that period of time, I was very, very badly tortured. I mean, from the get-go of, the gun being here, It was all abusive. It was degrading and dehumanizing. I was beaten. I was tortured. I was starved. I was dehydrated, chained up like an animal, tied up with tie straps. You name it. You know, think the worst, and that's what it was. And of course, I was sexually assaulted several times. Um, that seemed to be their crowning glory for whatever reason. Now, I'm saying this to set the stage for what was to come next. The horror, the real horror of what I endured. Um, I've done it. I've gone into great detail on other podcasts and so on. But it's very, very uh, it's put across in a very detailed and a very raw manner in my book, which is entitled Bare Feet. And we'll get to how that even became a thing. Because although I've always been a writer, I would never have chosen to write a book about that experience. It was way too traumatic. Um, in any event, during that 2-week period, I saw no light. Um, simply because I was masked and duct taped and wrapped up and all of that, and I was unable to move and whatnot. I went into shock several times due to the trauma, the assaults, the beatings. Um, it was just a conglomeration of every hideous act you can think of. Closer to my release, I would say maybe 2 or 3 days max before I was released. My body was my mind was pretty strong in the sense that I knew that I loved Jesus. And again, from the get-go, as abusive as it was, from the get-go, the single name and the single thought, other than my babies, was the name of Jesus. There was just no one else. I was lost to the world, and I knew there was no one else who could assist me or work some miracle or help me to understand at least what was happening and why, other than him. And so I held on to him, and I held on to that name, that very, very powerful name, which I had grown up hearing about, but not fully understanding the meaning of all of the things that I had learned. And I would say, let me just backtrack. Maybe about a week into my captivity or less, the man that I referred to as the keeper, he was responsible for essentially keeping me alive so that I could be exchanged for ransom. Money, which, by the way, we did not possess and still do not possess, just so that there's no misconception. We were never wealthy, never, and still we're not. This man was a beast in terms of his build, his size, his mannerism, his voice, the size of his hand alone, because I was being so severely choked. I could tell the size of his hand. He was a beast physically, and in the way that he abused me, in the way that he beat me, it was maniacal, right? In a matter of, I would say, overnight, maybe of hours, he changed from beast mode to cute little, well, I won't, well, okay, let me not push it. Not cute little, but a little lamb, a little baby. And that happened when I questioned God to the point where I was exhausted. Why was this happening to me? Why me? What did I do to deserve this kind of treatment? Nobody's perfect. No, I'm not saying nobody's perfect, but I led a very conservative, simple life. I married my first boyfriend. My life was essentially included, school-based activities, church-based activities, and then back home. There was no clubbing and all of that kind of, there was nothing like that in my life. I was never interested in it. And my head was always buried in a book, right? So I'm like, okay, where did I go wrong? What was the thing that I did that caused me to be in this situation? I spent maybe about 2, 3 days just, letting loose on God as to why this had happened to me. When I was fully well exhausted, really, really spent on asking all of these questions, which, by the way, were answered, but answered over a period of years at different points in my life. He answered every single one of them. When I was spent, I was so exhausted because I knew, listen, there's no way I'm going to find out what's going on the outside. There's no way I'm going to know if money is being raised. I knew, one thing I did know was we did not have the kind of money they were asking for. We did not possess it, and there was no way we could raise that money in such a short space of time, days or even weeks. There was just no way. So in my mind, it was set. I am going to die. It was simply a matter of when and how. So I was trying to come to terms with that in my head. I'm going to die here alone with some strange person who has treated me like an animal. I was trying to come to terms with that. And so I raged on God, but my love for God never changed. I questioned him. I was angry with him. I was very, very confused, but I never stopped loving him. And that was something that later on the keeper could not wrap his head around. Eventually, what happened was I handed that situation over to God. And I said, you know what? It's all good. I've been beaten, I've been tortured, I've been assaulted, I am thoroughly battered and bruised and unable to control anything in this situation. So you know what, Lord? Okay. You want me to die in some horrific way, God knows how, at the hands of who knows who, because there was no sight, I couldn't tell. This is the way you want me to go out? Okay, I'll go out. But you better take care of my babies. Because that was my main concern, my 2 young kids. And I gave it up. I simply gave it up, whatever. And I remember the terror of lying there and just kind of waiting for a knife or waiting for a bullet, whichever one it was going to be. But as soon as I gave it up, Betty, it was a matter of hours. I mean, like the next day, that man came back. He was bringing me home warm home-cooked meals, medication for the pain that was just running through my body. He very attentive, bringing me sufficient water, trying, encouraging me gently. You have to drink a little bit. You're very dehydrated. I mean, it's not such a nice language, of course, but he was gentle compared to the way that he was before. Eventually, through a series of conversations and with him, his life actually turned around because he was so curious about this Jesus that I loved. He couldn't fathom that such a thing existed. So long story short, he became my protector. This man turned 180 degrees. And for the first time in his life, he found someone, meaning me, that would listen to him and would explain things to him and would be patient with him and would actually teach him something that was good for him, for his life. And it was the first time he had had that experience. And so he referred to me as his friend. And he made a promise that he would somehow get me home to my children. He had no clue how, but he promised me that he would. He promised me that nobody would touch me, nobody would hurt me. And if anyone attempted to kill me, they would have to kill him first. I always attribute that to God. That was all him, not me. I was merely the conduit through which that message came. And so he begged for forgiveness from me, which I really and truly did. I did forgive him because I began to understand where this man was coming from for the first time. And I remember when he asked me if I hated him for what he had done to me. And he very well knew that he had essentially destroyed my life. And I said no, and I really truly meant it. I did not hate him. And he couldn't get that. Why don't you hate me? You should hate me. And I'm like, no, because Jesus did not come to the earth, did not come into this world to condemn people, to kill people, to judge people. He came to save the lost. So if that was his mission when he came, who am I to judge you? Because the same creator, the same God that made you, made me. So why should I judge you? You've got your part. Now, people very often misunderstand this to be, oh, she just forgot that. No, in no way did I condone what he did. And I told him, I don't like what you did. I don't condone it. It's wrong. Any which way you slice it, it's wrong. But I'm not going to be the one to judge you. That's between you and God. I can answer for myself. You should be able to answer for yourself. And I was saying all of these things. It was strange. I was saying all of these things and I was teaching him all of this stuff that I knew, some of which I wasn't even aware of. But it was coming out of my mouth. And I'm teaching this guy and I'm telling him things. And in hindsight, I'm amazed that I even knew all of that. And that's why, again, I attribute it to the Holy Spirit. It was just flowing through me. It was not me. It was all him. And he changed, and that in itself was divine. Um, However, 2 days before I was eventually released, I felt really, really exhausted. My body was battered. I hadn't been, lack of sleep, trauma, assault, you name it. My body itself was just giving up. And I felt like, I was just drifting off into a sleep. Now, mind you, I'm chained. I had been chained for close to 2 weeks, right? And I just gave up physically. And that sleep that I thought that I was falling into turned out to be death. And the reason I know is because literally in the blink of an eye, I was above my body and looking at myself, the condition I was in, the position on the bed, the handcuffs, the contents of this little room that I was being held in. I saw everything that was in that room. I saw myself. I saw the condition my body was in, and I said, well, wait a minute, how can I be here and be there? It just doesn't make sense, right? I remember going down to my body and looking at my chest. And there was no movement. I looked, I just really looked. No movement in my chest. And I put my finger, to the area of the mask where my nostrils were, and I was like, but there's no breathing. I was just like, all of a sudden I was like, oh crap, I'm dead. But it was not a fearful or anxious statement. It was simply a statement of a fact. Like, the sun is shining. Like, okay, I'm dead. No fear, no anxiety, anything. What I did know was there was no pain in my body. No pain, no itching, no heart racing, no hunger, no sleep deprivation, nothing. I felt perfect in body and mind. I had never felt like that. before I could even process another thought, okay, what do I do now? There's this brilliant white light on my left. I mean, the sun is like compared to the brilliance of this white light. And out of it, Jesus steps out, and he's donned in this white robe, but all I could see was light. And there was no, okay, I wonder who, it was an instant knowing, this is Jesus. And I felt so humbled to be in his presence. I just dropped to his feet. I just dropped. I did not feel worthy to even look at his face. And I dropped to his feet, and I always describe this whenever I do interviews, that I dropped and I saw his, his toes. And I was like staring at his toes, and I'm like, I wonder if I should just touch, just like touch the toenail or something, should I be brave enough? And I'm contemplating all of that, and I'm admiring the beauty of this light emanating from his feet, from his toes. And at a glance, it looked like the rim of sandals. And I'm thinking, oh, his sandals are so gorgeous. And I looked closer, and I realized that it was light. It was just pure white light emanating. He was bare feet, just like I was bare feet when I was abducted. And I was held captive bare feet. Hence the name of the book, Bare Feet. And there's so many other reasons that the Lord showed me this book and gave it that name. He gave the title, not me. And I mean, that's another lesson all unto itself. But I reveled in the bliss and the utter contentment of just being there on the ground at his feet. I didn't care to see anything more or go any other place. I was just happy there. And, but he lifted me up, and he said, he told me, I know you're tired. You can rest now. And he cradled me in his arms, just like that, like you would a newborn baby. And I fit as an adult. I fit very snugly in his arms. That's how large his love is, you see. And he said, you can rest now. And I snuggled on him like nobody's business, and I slept sweetest sleep ever. And when I woke up, I didn't think it was possible, but when I had awoken, I was on the beaches of heaven, but I felt even better in terms of the condition of my body. I felt even stronger and healthier, and it was just perfect. It was perfect. And I was over his shoulder like this, like you would hold a toddler. And I was looking backwards, and I knew he was holding me. And I felt so safe, like nothing could hurt me, nothing. And I looked back, and I knew he was walking, and I thought to myself, well, why aren't there any footprints? And telepathically he responded. Everything was telepathy. And it was not as though I was unable to speak. I could have if I wanted to, but there was no need, you see? I thought it, and he responded. He responded, and then I responded in my thoughts as well. There was just no need. I know, but that's odd. How come there are no footprints? And his response was, because you're not supposed to go back. And it kind of settled into my spirit that, okay, I'm dead, and I'm here to stay. But there were these lingering thoughts of my babies, they kept me alive, just thoughts of them, memories of them, their smell, little things they would say and do, and they kept me going until my body couldn't go any further. But the thoughts I had of my children were not grievous thoughts. They were not like, oh, my children. No, it was impossible to feel that kind of anxiety and fear in the presence of God. Impossible. You could not. because those elements of fear, anxiety, depression, all of those, they stem from a dark place. And the only thing that can get rid of darkness is light, and Jesus is light. Therefore, it cannot exist in his presence. And furthermore, as we walked, he eventually put me down on the sand. Now, I grew up on a tropical island, so I loved beaches, been to beaches all the time. But there was something about this beach, the blues in the water I had never seen, the different shades, the aquatic life, different fish. But my vision was such where I could see through the water. I could see the individual fish and the plant life, and I could see down to its skeleton without any real effort. And I'd see this, okay, look, there's a big brownish looking one going over there, and there's a colorful one going behind the rock. And I'm seeing all of this, and I'm on the sand. And I'm just marveling. And what I noticed was when Jesus walked, because he was holding my hand, he'd walk a few steps. And as he walked, the water would stop its movement. So there's a horizon, going this way. And as he walked, the what is the natural movement of water? Gentle waves coming up would cease, and it would be in a dead straight line on the sand, which really is scientifically impossible, really. But see, that does not apply in the heavenly realm. None of these rules, the so-called rules that we live by here, time included, does not exist. And the water would stop and the fish would stop, because I saw the fish stop moving to pay homage to Jesus, to honor Jesus as he was passing. And then as he would walk a little further, then the water would resume its movement. And then that section of water would stop again as we moved. It was very odd, but so beautiful. And that's what Jesus relayed to me. He said, everything must stop in my presence and honor me. And it was not a boast. There was no boastfulness in that, or pride even. It was a statement. And I was in such awe. The sand, Betty, the sand was, I mean, you can't count the grains of sand. You just can't, right? But I remember just wiggling my toes in it and digging these little holes in the sand with my toes. You swear I've never seen sand before. I mean, I grew up on an island, right? You'd swear. And I looked, I picked up the sand, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, they're actually crystals. So I could see each grain of sand when I picked it up. And I could see that this one was different from the one next to it. And I could take this one grain of sand and I could just like admire the beauty of it, because it's a crystal. And just admire the beauty of each and every grain of sand on that beach, like forever. And I would not be bored. It was unreal. It was so real. And when I was done wiggling with this, I mean, Jesus was just, kind of humored by, the way I was in awe of everything. And I looked up at what should have been the sky. And and I thought, wait a minute, why are there no clouds? Why is there no sun? Well, what is this? But there was light everywhere. And Jesus's response was, well, we don't need clouds, and we don't need the sky. That we don't function. There's no need for that in heaven. You are free here. That there was no ceiling through which I could not move and travel if I wished. There was no limit. There was no sky's the limit. No. There were no clouds because there was no need for rain. Not that it could not rain, but there was no need for it. There was no sun because we don't need the sun. The light that I saw was the light of God. And the light of God covers and encompasses and envelopes everything that I saw. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Suddenly everything started to make sense. And the breeze that I was feeling, he said, that's the breath of God, which gives life to everything. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you learn, you read about these things, but you don't really understand until you're there. And I'm marveling, and I look at the trees, regular trees you'd see on a beach, not the palm trees, but other tropical trees. The rich greens I'd never seen before, and I have never seen here, anywhere here on Earth. And under the leaves and behind the rocks, there were no shadows. There was just light emanating from the plants. Life and light was emanating from the rocks, the leaves, the trunk of the leaves, the trees, the branches, everything, even the sand, everything was pulsating with its own identity. And it was alive in its own way, but it shared the same heartbeat. It's the best way I can frame that. And the heartbeat that it shared was that of God. And I grew to understand that. Then we got to the end of the beach, and there was this even more magnificent light. And I heard there was a voice coming out of that. I know I could look at these the white light and Jesus and not squint. Nothing hurt my eyes. There was this voice that came out, most beautiful voice I'd ever heard and will ever hear. And the voice said to me, because I wondered at the beauty of the voice, said, my voice is the most beautiful sound you will ever hear. But for those who do not belong to me, it will be the worst sound that they ever hear. In hindsight, I understood what that meant. And he said, I know you wish to go back to your children. And I said, yes, Lord, yes. But not with sorrow, not with anxiety, not with, oh, let me go back, no. At that point, I was filled with so much wonder. I could have happily stayed there. But my babies, they were lingering in my head. And he said, okay, I'll send you back to your children, but you've got to continue my work on earth. And this is what you have to do. And there comes this list. And at the top of the list is this book. He shows me this book. Exactly, the front cover, the back cover, everything. He shows me the font style of the title, Bare Feet. He shows me everything about that book, Bare Feet. And he told me that's what the name should be. Do not change the title. And he told me, do not worry about how you will find the strength to write this book. Because believe me, writing that book almost killed me. And he shows this to me and says, that's your first task. Then you will counsel people and you will teach people and you will spread my message all over the world. And his message was this, and continues to be this: I see all, I hear all, I know all that is done in the darkness and the light, and I save. And I'm supposed to be the living example of the fact that he saves. Because I was saved from an impossible situation, logically. And this is what the police have said, this is what the doctors have said. And then God himself just faded, that light faded, and there was Jesus in all his brilliance, laughing and swinging me around and kissing me all over the head, and he's so happy. And then he placed his hand on my head and blessed me. But it was an intense warmth, almost like a fiery warmth that went through my entire body. But it didn't hurt. And I knew what he was doing. He was cleansing me. He was cleansing me of wounds that the police could not find evidence of after. He was cleansing me of STDs and HIV, which all of the doctors and experts were saying I had definitely contracted, 98% chance, they said. he was cleansing me, so I'd be prepared to do the work. And he walked back down the beach. We were swinging hands like little kids, and I'm admiring the beauty. And when we got to the end of the beach, meaning where we first started our journey, there were the saints. There was Abraham, Moses, Isaac, Jacob, Elijah, and there's Mother Mary. Now, I'd read about these names in the Bible, but I didn't know anything about them. I did not see their faces. Their heads were bowed in prayer, except for Mother Mary. Beautiful, beautiful mother. She turned and faced me and smiled, what can only be described as a mother's smile. And she said her message to the world is that God always answers the prayer of a mother. Now, again, all of these statements sound so very surface level basic, but in hindsight, over the years, I began to understand the depth of what she meant, the depth of what God Almighty said, the depth of what Jesus said. And I remember Jesus, after she said that, she smiled and she bowed her head. And then Jesus came up next to me and he said, everything will be okay. It's not going to be easy, but it will be okay. And there was this loud sound on my left, just behind my left shoulder. And he said, this is Archangel Michael. He will stay with you and protect you until your work is done. And then the same sound on my right shoulder. Whoop, like something massive and metallic had just dropped. And he said, this is Archangel Gabriel, and he'll be here. You can call on him for wisdom or guidance or understanding whenever you need to, and I will always be with you. And with that, Jesus left. And I remember, I could go into such detail about Michael. Michael is one of my buddies. He's been with me since, like, very, very frequently. Gabriel, yes, but Michael and I have a kind of kinship. Again, just to clarify, I do not worship Mother Mary. I do not worship the saints. I do not worship the angels. I worship God Almighty. But they are my friends who I have conversations with. And with that, I began to grow very, very tired. And I crawled up, curled up on the sand, like in a fetal position, literally. And I journeyed back to my body. And I remember that journey being, oh my goodness. Sometimes I really regret coming back here. It was so, like, words can't even begin to describe. I was free. I could travel at the speed of thought to any planet, to any universe, to any part of this world at the speed of thought. And I could travel back and forward in time through space and the spaces between the spaces. There's just no other way to describe it. I was able to do that. But I was sucked back into my body. And I remember how horrible that was. And there was this gasp of breath and all of the pain and everything came back. And I was like, oh my God, back here again. But I knew that I would be free. I had no idea how, but I knew what I knew. And there was no longer any fear, none whatsoever. Eventually, a minuscule portion of the ransom they asked for was paid, minuscule. The police were confused. Why would they keep a hostage alive after 4 days and no money was paid? A hostage becomes a liability after 4 days, maximum 5 days. No money was paid. They knew we had no money. Why was I kept alive? No answer. Police could not find out. Why was I given back my phone, my own phone, so that wherever they dropped me off, I could call my husband directly? Because I was familiar with the keypad. Why? Police could not understand. Why did they accept so little money? Police could not understand. I go in for checkups, the usual bag and tag, forensic swabs, you name it. That was a horror story all unto itself. And the doctor said, let me be honest, I have to be honest with you, there's a 98+% chance that you have contracted HIV, and God knows what other STDs. I just said, That was my response to everything. Smile and nod, because I knew what I knew. All of the tests came back negative, and this was the doctor. The entire process, confused. They could not find the kind of beatings that I endured. They could not find the bruises and cuts and whatnot that would have matched that kind of a beating, to the point where the police thought I was lying. Why would I lie about that? You know? But in any event, those were some of the divine, miraculous things that occurred. 2 days after I was released, I started speaking about the incident and about the death issue, much to the displeasure of many, many people around me, very close people to me. But I made a promise to God to do it, and that's what I'm doing. And I will do it until I have no breath left in me. So the book was written 3 years after it was released. It's been a bestseller then. I came to Canada. I relaunched it. It's a bestseller again. Not because of me, but because of what the Lord wants. He wants his word out. And yeah, so that was that death experience. But I've had many other spiritual ones since then, especially with Michael, especially with Archangel Michael. I remember this particular time I went into a store, and I'm shop. I don't remember what I was shopping for, but I was waiting in a line or something, and this individual who's clearly on drugs, clearly a drug addict, he came into the said store, and he was just brandishing this. I think it was a broom handle or something like that. It was a piece of wood. And he was threatening the customers and intimidating everyone. And just before he came into that store, I heard Archangel Michael's sword. I always used to hear his sword being slowly removed from its sheath, that dragging sound. And I heard it. I remember I heard it and I said, okay, something's off here. And I was about to make my way to exit the store when this guy comes in. And I heard his wings go up. And his wings are not like, oh, the pretty wide. No. Archangel is a soldier. He is serious business. Okay, he doesn't grin with you or anything like that. I heard his sword, and then I heard his wings when this man came up. And he's threatening everybody. And I'm trying to edge my way towards the door. Now, mind you, I'm not afraid. There's no heart racing or fear, because I know Michael is there on my left side. And my left shoulder gets very, very warm whenever he's around. And the man looks at me because I moved. And because I moved, he looks at me like this, and then he goes this way. His entire face changes. He goes pale, and he bolts out the door before the police can even get there. I knew what he saw. And as soon as he bolted, I heard the sword go back in and the wings. And I knew from then on, and that's just one instance. Many people would just total, absolute strangers would walk up to me. Do you know you're not supposed to be alive? I'm like, excuse me? This is an absolute stranger. You do know you're supposed to be dead, right? And I'm like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm pretending, I don't want to get into that conversation with a stranger. And they're like, yeah, God sent you back for a reason. Do what he says. And there'd be other elements around. Anytime there was danger, driving down the highway and, near misses in terms of car accidents and stuff like that, I'd hear Archangel Michael's wings. And I knew, okay, something's, and shortly after something would happen, or there'd be a close call or something like that. And I knew he was there guarding me, because there were people after me. And spiritual dark elements after me. And he was there to protect me. Just as Jesus was with me and still is with me every single day. So yeah, that's the gist of my story. There's so many details, but that's the gist of it. Yes.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Can you let people know how they can get a hold of you?
Well, I left you my contacts, but just about everything can be found on my website. That's debbieali.com, DEBBIEALI.com. You can book counseling appointments. Um, I've got my blogs on there. I've got images of Jesus and Mother Mary. Everything you can find about me. Now I'm out of stock with the books, but there is a direct link to Amazon and Barnes and Noble where you can make your purchases of the book there if you so desire. Yeah. And of course, you can feel free to email me as well if you feel the need to talk or whatever. I'm here.